Hi, and welcome to another weekday quick insight mini version. And today we're going to be speaking with Audrey Daniels, who is the founder and is consultant at Amplify LLC, which is a company where she works to help leaders and organizations build, grow, and be profitable. Today we're going to be talking with Audrey about the whole area of discipline and corrective action, which is an area I know we all just love doing. Sometimes it has to be done, but it's never fun. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Audrey and let her take it.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Audrey Daniels, and I am the founder of Amplify here in Oklahoma City, where we pride ourselves in just helping small businesses grow and be profitable. Today, we're going to talk about and speak about performance management, specifically people problems, which includes discipline and firing. So I'm really excited to talk about that because that's really tough. And one thing I want to say is that the importance of strong relationships, because performance is management, it's about people, but it's also about relationships. And so the importance of a strong employer relationships within a business is highly essential. And it also is the key to ultimate success. Employees will generally tend to be more productive and also more efficient when they are subjected to great relationships within the company. And I believe that it starts with relationships and dealing with performance management. And again, that's what we're going to talk about today. I love this quote. I love this slide because it sums it up very well, that success is the sum of all efforts repeated day in and day out. And throughout this webinar, I'm going to be talking about the importance of communication and feedback when it comes to people problems and discipline. So the agenda for today includes setting clear expectations, critical conversations, and corrective action management. And again, this is in dealing with performance management. So before we begin, I want to go ahead and give you an overview of the different functions within performance management. And that consists of course, setting clear expectations, training and coaching, constant feedback. And once we do these things as employers, we're either going to get success or we're going to get failure. Which includes discipline and possibly sometimes letting people go, termination. So within, though, it's very key to know that termination, discipline, people problems is only one part of performance management. It includes all things that you see here. And so when you're thinking about your performance management plan, I want you to really be intentional and think about, of course, what we're going to discuss today, but also your future needs or your needs you have right now in the areas of skills and competencies, job descriptions, feedback, rewards, discipline, promotion, training programs, enforcement of corporate policies, and annual employment performance evaluations. And I do this again to let you know that the people portion, as far as dealing with people problems like in terminations and discipline, is part of that whole. It encompasses all of this. Why is it important? Because if we have all of these things in line, it helps with preventing people problems to happen. Not to say that they won't, but it is a preventative measure. So I want to start first with setting clear expectations. So setting expectations for your employees is an essential responsibility. Clear employee expectations benefit not only your staff, but your business as a whole. Setting employee expectations can eliminate or reduce confusion and increases the chances of employees being successful in achieving the goals set for them. So employees who achieve their goals overall enhance the success of the entire organization. So what are employer expectations? And I know we're all on this as employers, as leaders, but I really wanted to be specific in really what do I mean so I can be intentional with you all when I talk about employer expectations. So with employer expectations, employers expect employees to act professionally and exhibit certain behaviors. An employee's job depends on their ability to assist employers and to make money. So if the business loses money, an employee job may disappear. So at the top of employers' list of expectations, most employers would include commitment, enthusiasm, dependability, and a willingness to learn and accept feedback. Now, starting with setting clear expectations, while employees are the greatest asset of an organization, bad employee behavior can cause great liabilities because, again, today we're talking about people problems and discipline, including firing. Poor workplace behavior can take several forms. And so I want to discuss that first. Exactly what are people problems? What consists of poor workplace behaviors? And the first is workplace aggression. That's common. And this refers to the repeated mistreatment of one or more employees with a malicious mix of humiliation, intimidation, and sabotage of performance. Disruptive work behavior can include yelling, tantrums, bullying, displaying the need for excessive control, disregard of duty, and insubordination. Being unproductive is also a poor workplace behavior, which is uncommunicative employees, as well as those who regularly miss deadlines or fail to complete assigned work, will over time hurt the company with their inattention and laziness. Gossiping is another poor workplace behavior. So sharing negative, often untrue or incomplete information about colleagues or company management can create tension and distrust in the workplace. And last but not least, oversharing. Many people feel uncomfortable when a coworker overshares details of their personal or professional lives. The reason why I'm showing poor workplace behaviors is I want to identify those behaviors for the sake of this presentation today, this webinar today, so that we can all be in a line to the mission of this presentation. So with setting clear expectations, this actually helps with employees who are behaving poorly. And it actually is a preventive measure when it comes to employee discipline. And as an employer, when you have, I'm going to go back when you have that poor workplace behavior, what you can do as an employer to assist with that is to educate employees. And this includes giving all managers learning tools to identify what's inappropriate in the workplace and establish a company policy for handling such behavior. Also, with educating employees, this is really critical. We must be clear on what work behaviors are considered illegal. So it's not just about being inappropriate. It's about being very specific on whom to approach and what to document when these situations arise. So often taking proactive steps to coach employees about inappropriate bad behavior can prevent situations that can escalate to a hostile work environment, including things like unlawful harassment. So it's important to us as employers when we're setting clear expectations to prevent work habits that are not positive, that they know what behaviors are acceptable and not in the workplace. Often, situations can be avoided by announcing expectations right away. Besides, employees should be able to approach you as a business owner or as a manager or leader comfortably about inappropriate behaviors observed without punishment. So consider instructing employees on how to report inappropriate behavior to upper management. The next is setting an example that executives and management should set the tone for acceptable behavior in the workplace, because it's really hard to enforce policies if leaders are not adhering to them. And one thing that is for sure is and this is a must, we must enforce policies consistently as a way to prevent employees and people behaving badly, which leads to that discipline. So we have to be consistent, very important. The thing about it is workplace behaviors really is a tricky subject and can become even more difficult to as far as discipline when one person gets away with displaying a behavior, as we know, but another doesn't. So inconsistent discipline can lead to things such as discrimination claims. So a way to prevent that is to be sure to enforce policies consistently. It's all about setting and practicing transparencies when we're going to set these clear expectations. If a company's management team has a reputation for honesty, accountability, employees may be less likely to spread rumors or attempt to undermine others as a competitive strategy. Gossiping and backbiting within an office often have roots in a lack of transparency at the management level. So if possible, share information about your business with employees and be aware of their concerns. Another way to set clear expectations is to offer support. Some bad workplace behaviors could definitely be avoided if employees feel more comfortable discussing issues with their supervisors. An example of this would be an employee who has become less productive. Let's just say you have an employee who is less productive and who has not had that to happen and may be dealing with a family crisis. Encouraging workers to speak with their managers or leaders or the business owner before health or personal issues impact job performance benefits both them and the workplace. So it's very important to offer that support. And at the end of the day, if all those things are not working or you're having issues with those situations, it's really important to seek help. If behavior issues become too severe with your organization, you may want to consider seeking external help or help from within the organization. One of the things I really encourage for small businesses is that they have some sort of a management consultant or a consultant team that is able and available to shoot ideas from. That's very important. And so when it comes to people problems, including discipline, if that's something that you may be struggling with, again, I really advise you to seek help. The next part of this that we're going to talk about when it comes to performance management, people problems, discipline, and firing are critical conversations. Another way to prevent this from happening, or we see that poor performance, is to have a critical conversation about it. Have you ever heard your car make a noise that didn't sound right? Even as the noise grows louder, you put off getting it fixed. And I am so guilty of this. Then one day your car breaks down. The realization that you could have avoided the problem earlier hits you like a punch to the gut. Unfortunately, this is the same logic exercised by many business leaders when it comes to difficult conversations with employees. So, initiating a simple talk can be a real roadblock. Whether it's performance issues or employees feuding, there comes a time when leaders must break the silence. It's easy for us as business owners and managers sometimes to brush the issue under the rug. And this is because we often don't know how to handle the situation or emotional employees. But avoiding these conversations can make the situation even worse. The longer you wait, the more it can affect the workplace environment and productivity. So, with critical conversations on the list of leadership merit badges, successfully deliver hard news is one of the hardest badges to acquire because it's not just about or that you have news, it's hard news. It's an honest something, it's an honest something sometimes that the human sitting across from you does not want to hear. Sometimes they just don't. So not only do you need to deliver it, but you need to deliver it successfully. Um, and we've all been there. So, what I want to talk about is for difficult conversations, sometimes I know that it can be difficult. But if you're a manager, you're going to need, or a business owner, we're going to need to get used to managing different difficult conversations once in a while. It's basically a part of the job. And unfortunately, it's definitely not always easy. So, with critical conversations, the most challenging conversation with employees are the ones that go beyond simple fact-based discussions to touch on topics more sensitive or personal in nature, and ones that were left to fester over time. These are often related to performance, lack of advancement, letting people go, aspects of behavior that are more nuanced, like demeanor, hygiene, or attitude. And it's really important for us to understand that sometimes it is not about what we are saying, but the fact that we didn't say something in a timely way. Basically, that we have to let an issue become more pronounced for us to address it. And we shouldn't do that. When we don't nip things in the bud, the discussion is definitely much harder. But why does it matter for us to have those critical, difficult conversations? How an employer handles difficult conversations has a huge impact on their relationship with their team. And a poorly handled conversation can erode trust and negatively impact morale and productivity. And that means your team isn't reaching their goals. And if they are, they're definitely not reaching those goals in a timely manner. So, here are some ways that you can prepare for that critical conversation. So, before the conversation, we have to prepare. Excuse me. Even as an experienced leader or manager, take the time to really prepare ahead of the conversation. We need to, we need to be specific, concrete, and clear. Collect your facts and support what you are saying with data. It's an old saying that I learned a long time ago, and that is it is definitely important for us to speak with data. If you have particularly sensitive or hot button issues, make sure you have covered your bases with either HR, a consultant, or key stakeholders. Think through what you are going to say and also prepare or what they might say and questions they might ask. It's important to think through how you will be able to control your own emotions and anticipate where they will react or feel defensive. In other words, I don't want any business owner, leader, or manager out there to do the YOLO approach. And if you don't know what YOLO means, it's an acronym, YOLO. It means you only live once. Hard conversations need preparation. And preparing, if you look at this slide, it's important for us to, one, get the facts. Two, step into their shoes. Three, acknowledge and remove any emotions. Four, think about possible solutions. Five is to create an objective statement. And what an objective statement is once you've gone through all of the steps I mentioned, you'll be able to distill your objective down to one sentence for clarity. Try to break the sentence down to three parts. What seems to be happening? How is this impacting the team? And what do you want to achieve? So for instance, to create an objective statement, this is an example. It would be, first of all, what seems to be happening is, for instance, you, the employee, your employee is being late. And then you would state how that's impacting the team. You employee being late is impacting the team, including people, other people, your teammates having to work later hours, our goals for the team and the company not being met, and also it is not good for morale when you're not here because it puts a burden on your other team members. And also talk about what you would like to achieve. With this meeting that we're having, this conversation, this critical conversation, I would like to achieve a way for you to be on time. How can I assist with that? That's just one example of many, but having that objective statement prepared before the discussion is really important. Also, think about and prepare logistics. And what I mean by logistics is take a minute to think about when and where you want to have the discussion. Is the discussion, for instance, going to take place during a scheduled one-on-one, or will it take place in a separate meeting? And also, is there a place in your office where you can speak privately, including not people hearing beyond the walls? So basically, be sure also when it comes to logistics to schedule plenty of time for the conversation so you're not rushing. Book a highly visible meeting space, like a glass conference room. And sometimes it's even good to have a witness there. And this creates an environment that is not only safe for the employee, but for you. And also remove distractions. And make sure not to book the meeting too far in advance. And I am so sorry, I actually misspoke on one as far as the logistics. Actually, don't book a highly visible meeting space. Excuse me. It needs to be very confidential. And if you believe or you feel uncomfortable talking to the employee one-on-one, it is okay to have a witness in the meeting. And for witness, it needs to be someone like an outside consultant or another manager or owner for the discussion. So during the discussion, it's important for us to focus on the facts and real examples. So we want to stay away from words like always and never, okay? It's about being really present. Don't get distracted by your phone. Be in a quiet space where you can have the conversation uninterrupted. Be prepared to have the path forward defined about what happens next once you leave the room. Also, it's about knowing your triggers. So I'm talking about us as the business owners, the managers, and the leaders. Know what engages your fight or flight response and what engages your collaborative response. And I also want you to consider employees' triggers too. For instance, a trigger of mine, and I'm just going to be really honest with you guys, is excuses. Excuses, it just irritates me. It's a trigger. The thing is, me knowing this, going into a meeting one on one when I need to have a critical conversation, I need to be aware of that so that the employee or the person that I'm talking to can be focused on my words instead of my reactions or my body language. So when basically what I do when I start hearing excuses, I just focus on my objective for that conversation, whatever that may be. In the case of the example I gave, it's about attendance. So when there's excuses, I'm going to go back to why we are here for that day. And it's very important that you do that. Also, it's important when we do know our triggers and also understand theirs or be ready for theirs, it shows that we care, that recognize that it makes a difference to communicate and demonstrate that there is a relationship with you and the employee, or whoever it may be beyond the conversation. Remember that it is a point in time, not the sum of an entire person's history, worth, or value. Think about how you're conveying to the person that you care about them and what happens to them. One of the best teachers out there with these critical conversations would be John C. Maxwell, and he said something amazing in a podcast I recently heard about expectations. Um, and the quote goes something like this. The statement goes something like this: "You have to value people. There's no other way around it, because when you and I'm not talking about what they can do for you, but you have to show value because they're a human being." And I really want you to think about that showing that you care, a way to show it, especially if it's something that is frustrating or upsetting to you, is to first value that employee, that contractor, whoever, as a human being, and focus on the objective and um, not the person's behavior when it comes to having that discussion. And I know that's a little confusing, but what I basically mean is the relationship goes beyond the conversation, and the relationship goes beyond what that person did that was out of line. It's an old saying: don't let one situation make you throw away all the other positive things that may have happened with that person. Okay. And that goes into recognizing the emotional impact. Um, Even bad news, like we're downsizing and I have to let you go, can be done respectfully. It's about recognizing, for instance, that this is bad news and will have a significant human and emotional impact on the employee. Even something as small as your attendance is not up to status quo, that we have issues, for instance, with an employee attendance. It may seem small, but to that person, it may have an emotional impact. For instance, maybe they're late because because they're really sick, or their spouse is sick, or their child is sick all the time, or they may be having mental health issues. So no matter what the conversation and critical conversations, recognize that any and everything will have an emotional impact. And so we want that impact to be impactful in a positive way, even if that person doesn't take it like that. It's also important for us to be honest and clear, to be clear and honest. Let people have hope. Hope that for instance, hope that a promotion is still an option. Let's just say that we have to have a critical conversation. It's not yet into us having to write up someone, but it's enough where this could be a verbal. It's important for them to still understand that even though we had this critical conversation, that there is still hope for them in the future of a promotion or still being with your company, or hope that they can expect to continue to progress in their path at a future date or once the behaviors are addressed. And equally importantly, if this is not an option, this should be clear as part of the conversation as well. So what you don't also want to do, you don't want to give false hope because it can damage both the employer and the manager's reputation. So when I say give hope, that hope must be clear and honest. For instance, with you being late like this, for instance, with the example I gave earlier, if you continue this, there's a chance that you could actually be let go. And we don't want you for that. We want you to be here as an employee and continue to help us with our goals. So that's a way of giving hope and being clear and honest. So after the conversation, it's really important for us to follow up, follow up, follow up. I cannot stress this enough. When we're talking about people problems, employee problems, and discipline and firing, we need to follow up. And it should start the next day. So, what I mean by this is take a face to face moment to tell that person that you appreciated the conversation that you both had. In the first few days after the meeting, you want to offer your employee the chance to ask any follow-up questions or, if needed, to continue the discussion. Make sure they feel like they got to share their side. And in the days and the weeks to follow, check in regularly on any action items that set in that you said in a meeting or that you set. Don't badger them with daily follow-ups. Just every few days or once a week is fine. And also, when we're following up, we want to celebrate positive progress promptly to keep them focused and motivated. Don't let their hard work go unnoticed. If you see progress begin to falter, so let's say that you had this conversation and their progress is good, but all of a sudden now they're going back into the same type of pattern, same type of behavior. Steer them back on track, basically with a quick review of your meeting notes that you had at the initial meeting and action items that you may have had, whatever those may be. It shows them that you're supporting them and reminds them they're going to be held accountable. So with critical conversations, where we're talking about performance management, people problems, including discipline and termination, we need to be direct. We need to be specific, plan out the conversation. We need to watch our language. Be sure that the language that you have that objective statement and you are focused only on that objective for that meeting. Offer a solution. The solution, for instance, for attendance is, okay, we need to get on the right track. Is there anything I can help you as far as with the attendance? Maybe it would be a good thing that, for instance, I had an employee, their attendance problem was due to getting their kids to school, which now is a little bit different for what's going on now. But what I did, I asked them, well, would coming in 15 minutes earlier and staying 15 minutes later help with that? And that actually was helpful for them. So offer a solution. Manage your emotions. And I'm not talking about just the employee's emotions or the contractor's emotion. Manage your own emotions. Again, keep your triggers in check. Be sure to practice that. Again, a pet peeve of mine is a lot of excuses, and I know this. So when I'm in that meeting and I hear excuses that I believe it just doesn't sound right, I'm going to keep on the path of whatever my objective is. Be empathetic. Walk them out in their shoes. It's not about having gone through the same thing. It's just about understanding that people manage their day-to-day lives and the way they work, that is an individual process. And just because we don't understand it, we should still be empathetic so that we can come with the best solutions. And also allow the other person to ask questions. Moving on, lastly, I want to talk about corrective management, corrective action management. So corrective action management corrective action is a process of communicating with the employee to improve behavior or performance after other methods such as coaching and performance appraisals have not been successful. That is why I spoke about critical conversations first, because I believe in constant feedback, good or bad. I cannot say this enough. Continuously talk to your employees, have one-on-one meetings. If you can't have one-on-one meetings, have group meetings consistently, have that open door policy so that in a way to prevent us to getting to this point, which is the discipline part, which is corrective action management. Corrective action management, again, is because all employees are definitely expected to meet performance standards and behave appropriately in the workplace. So corrective action management usually goes like this: verbal warning, written warnings. And written warnings includes, for instance, first written warning, second written warning, and then you have your final warning. Suspension without pay, demotion to a lower classification, and dismissal. These are all corrective action ways. So, corrective action functions. I would say to you that if you're not familiar with verbal warnings or written warnings, that there are other different phrases for them. For instance, a verbal warning could also be called a verbal counseling, a written counseling. So I want you to focus on more of where I'm going with these 5 points than the actual verbiage that I'm using. Because again, depending on your organization and other organizations, they may have different ways of saying what a verbal warning is, but it's really all the same. So with the verbal warnings, what we should do is basically that with a verbal warning is something that's not on paper, but definitely is something that needs to be written down. So a verbal warning, for instance, for a supervisor is about having that objective statement. It's about stating clearly that you are issuing a verbal warning. You want to be specific in describing the unacceptable behavior or performance and remind the employee of the acceptable standards or rules. If they are available, it's in writing. They should be provided, it should be provided to the employee. So for instance, in a verbal warning, if you're talking about a poor behavior from the employee, you want to have like the policy for the behavior. You want to have, if you don't have policy set up, you want to have, for instance, some type of a document about why that behavior was not correct and how to correct it, whatever that may be. And a great place to look for those type of documents, I will refer you to LinkedIn or the SHRM website, which SHRM stands for Society of Human Resource Management. They have great information about verbal warnings and how to give out written verbal warnings. So again, a verbal warning, even though it's verbal, I would write it down. It does not have to be formal. You can write it down in a notebook, on your calendar that you actually had that you actually had a discussion with that person. Any of those will work, or even in an email. And that includes a follow-up email to the employee. From verbal warning, we go to written warning. So written warnings is after we have given that verbal warning and the problem performance or behavior persists. It's really a good idea to give a written warning. This action may be used more than once. However, if the problem continues to persist, repetitive letters may not be the solution. That repetitive warning may not be. So it's really important to state clearly in a written warning that what's the objective, what's the action. For instance, in this case, it will be attendance, and what will happen if there is a continuance of this issue. So for instance, for the person who has an attendance issue, I would have something written like, on this day, December the 9th, you were given a written warning for your attendance. In the past, we have discussed your attendance, and that includes the date of, because again, with the verbal warning, we have the dates written down to let them know. So you're going to let them know that that is not in compliance with your policies. So after that, I would even include something that goes along the lines of, in the future, if attendance, if not meeting attendance standards continues, it can include another written warning up to and including termination of employment. So in a written warning, you always want to make sure that you state the issue. If you've talked about it at an earlier time, and also what will happen if the employee does not get in line with your attendance policy. This is very important. Another corrective action or discipline that we can do is suspension without pay. So if, for instance, if the employee continues, for instance, with the attendance issue, you can also do a suspension without pay. And a suspension may be the next step in discipline after written warnings. Typically, suspensions will prevent an employee to work and requires the employee to leave without pay for 1 to 10 working days. But it should also include with a letter. So in the letter should include, for instance, state the action of the suspension without pay. So you want to state it, informing the employee of the number of days they will be suspended with the beginning and ending dates, and also describe the problem and the previous corrective action measures. So with the suspension of pay, to make it a little bit simpler, it would be just a letter stating to the employee, said employee, putting the date, you will be suspended without pay from this date to the end date. And attached are your previous written warnings or your constructive counselings, and just attach it so the employee knows that they have that suspension and when they can actually come back. Another way for another discipline method that works, a corrective action method, would be demotion to a lower classification. And this action involves moving an employee to a lower level position, and may be temporary or permanent. That's the thing, you can make this temporary or permanent. Demotion may be appropriate in cases of inadequate performance of responsibilities at a particular level, rather than a violation of work rules. So this is actually good also for inadequate performance responsibilities. It should be based upon a reasonable expectation that the employee will perform successfully in the lower classified position and possible pay. And of course, last but not least, and this is the one that I hate, most employers hate, is dismissal. So dismissal, also known as firing or termination of employment, this action may be appropriate after performance counseling, write-ups, and progressive corrective action have failed to get the employee to correct the problem. So it's really important that we think about dismissal if we have no other choice. I often say to employers this statement: an employee or contractor should never be shocked of you dismissing them or firing them. It should never be a surprise. Even if they act like it's a surprise, it should never be a surprise. We should have been giving that feedback from the beginning, including these steps, so that they know what path they're on within our company. When we do it this way, when we discipline, fire, or dismiss our employees this way, we first of all have a paper trail. We also have insight into what that employee what that employee's performance is. That employee will have performance into insight of that. And also it's a document of the types of employees that can come our way. And also it's a way for us, if this happens to another employee, what steps should we take? So having this corrective action management helps us, and it creates a story that we can refer to in any in a time where we may need it. And that's really important. All right, so how you help to prevent inappropriate work behavior. So how do we prevent inappropriate work behavior? As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So here are some ways to avoid having to deal with behavior issues within your organization, according to Houston Chronicle. The first, again, is to identify inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior should not be subjective or questionable. Give that feedback immediately. It's about educating your staff. Give all members, managers, bosses, employees learning tools to identify what is appropriate in the workplace and establish company policies for handling such behavior. And for small businesses, I don't want you to fret if you don't have like an employee handbook. That's not what I'm saying. If you have processes and policies that you want your employees to follow, it's a good idea to have them either written out on paper or to have verbal meetings, whether it be group meetings or verbal quick trainings, employee quick trainings on policies, and have them to sign that you had the discussion. Those things work as well. And last but not least, we have to lead by example. Executives and management should set the tone for acceptable behavior in the workplace and be consistent with when and how you enforce your policies. So I want to thank you for your time. And this actually concludes performance management. And we're talking about today, people problems, discipline, and firing. But before I go, does anyone have any questions? Okay, and if you do have questions, I want to let you know that I'm available. Again, my name is Audrey Daniels, and I'm the founder of Amplify. And my phone number is within this PowerPoint. It's 405-406-3256, and my email is audrey@anhcommunity.com. I want to thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you, Audrey. That was good.